Hello, my Graves Asian Ghost Stories family. Before tonight's story begins, I want to tell you something. Tonight's story is a little different from the ones I usually share. In many of our past stories, we saw cruel people, greedy people, and selfish people eventually pay the price for what they had done. Those stories remind us that evil does not always disappear quietly. But tonight, I want to tell you another kind of story. A story about kindness, about a simple act of saving someone's life, about a gift that looked worthless at first, and about a quiet guardian who protected a little girl again and again without ever asking for anything in return. Sometimes, horror stories teach us that bad people will face consequences. But sometimes, old folk tales remind us of something warmer. Good people can also be rewarded, and some blessings may stay with a family for many years. Wang Gang and his wife lived deep in the mountains when they were young. They were farmers. Their days were simple. At sunrise, they went up the mountain to work the fields. At night, they came home with mud on their shoes, ate whatever grain they had saved, and slept under a roof that leaked whenever the rain came too hard. One summer, Wang Gang went up the mountain as usual. By noon, the sun was so bright he could barely keep his eyes open. The heat pressed down on his shoulders. His shirt was soaked through with sweat. So he walked to the river nearby, planning to wash his face and rest for a while under the shade. He had only just sat down when he noticed something floating down from upstream. At first, he thought it was a piece of wood. Then it drifted closer, and he saw that it was a person. The man was lying face up in the water, eyes closed, body rising and falling with the current. He looked completely still. Wang Gang didn't think. He jumped into the river and dragged the man to shore. The stranger looked to be in his 40s. His skin was dark from the sun. His beard was messy. There were cuts and bruises all over his body, as if he had fallen down a mountain. But the strangest thing was his clothing. He wore a loose old robe stitched together from many different strips of colored cloth. Slung across his shoulder was a torn cloth bag. No matter how Wang Gang looked at him, the man resembled a wandering Taoist priest. That made Wang Gang uneasy. There were no temples in the nearby mountains, no Taoist shrines, no monasteries. So where had this man come from? He leaned down and checked the man's breathing. Still alive. Wang Gang wasted no more time. He lifted the stranger onto his back and carried him home. When his wife saw that he had brought someone back, she didn't ask many questions. She hurried into the kitchen, took a handful from what little grain they had left, and cooked a bowl of thin porridge. A long time later, the man finally opened his eyes. At first, he was so weak he couldn't speak. Only after drinking half the bowl of porridge did a little color return to his face. Wang Gang asked how he had fallen into the river. When the man answered, both husband and wife froze. His face belonged to a man in his 40s, but his voice sounded like that of a child. He said he had no name. He was only a traveler, moving from place to place in search of spiritual cultivation. He had come into the mountains looking for somewhere quiet to practice, but had wandered into a strange fog. He lost his direction, slipped, and fell into the river. He said he had survived only because Wang Gang saved him, and he insisted on repaying the couple. Wang Gang waved it off. You're alive. That's enough. There's no need to repay anything. The man listened silently. Then he removed the cloth bag from his shoulder and took out a doll. It was a cloth doll, just the image of an ordinary little girl. She wore a flower-patterned cotton jacket and gray pants. Her cheeks were sewn with 2 round patches of red cloth. Her hair was parted neatly in front, and at the back of her head were 5 long, thin braids. "Keep this doll," the stranger said, placing it in Wang Gong's hands. "It will protect your family." Wang Gong saw that it wasn't anything valuable, so he did not refuse. That night, he let the stranger sleep in the side room. The next morning, Wang Gong went to call him for breakfast. But when he pushed open the door, the bed was empty. The man had left at some point during the night. The couple assumed he had recovered enough to continue on his way, and they did not think much of it again. Several years passed. Wang Gong's wife gave birth to a daughter. They named her Xu Wen. By then, the couple was no longer young. This child had come to them late, and they cherished her more than anything. There weren't many toys for children in the countryside at that time, so Wang Gong took out the cloth doll the Taoist had left behind and gave it to Xu Wen. She loved it. She held it when she slept. When she went outside to play, she often carried it in her arms. But Xu Wen's grandmother was never satisfied. The old woman favored boys. She believed a family was never complete unless there was a son to carry on the bloodline. Every few days, she would urge Wang Gong and his wife to have another child. But the couple felt that Xu Wen was already sweet and obedient. Their family was not wealthy, and if they had another child, they feared both children would suffer. So, they never agreed. When Xu Wen was 6, Wang Gong and his wife went up the mountain to work and left the child in her grandmother's care. After they were gone, the old woman took Xu Wen by the hand and led her out of the house. She brought her to a deep bamboo forest. The bamboo there was tall and dense. Sunlight could barely reach the ground. Even adults from nearby villages could get lost if they were careless. There were also many naturally formed pits hidden inside the forest. Some openings were covered by dry leaves and weeds. If someone stepped wrong and fell in, it would be almost impossible to climb out alone. Xu Wen didn't know why her grandmother had brought her there. She only followed quietly, until the old woman led her to the edge of a deep hole. Xu Wen was just about to lean forward and look inside when she felt a sudden force from behind. Her body lost balance. The next second, she rolled down into the hole. Her small body struck the earthen walls again and again before landing hard at the bottom. For a long time, Xu Wen could not breathe through the pain. When she finally lifted her head, she could only see a small circle of sky far above her. "Grandma!" She started crying at once. "Grandma, I can't get up." The figure above the hole stood there for a while. Xu Wen cried harder. "Grandma, I'm scared." In the end, the old woman turned and walked away. The sound of her feet crushing dead leaves grew farther and farther, then disappeared completely. She thought that as long as this girl was gone, her son and daughter-in-law would have to have another child. And maybe the next one would be a boy. Xu Wen cried and screamed at the bottom of that hole for a very long time. She tried to climb by stepping against the dirt wall, but the soil was damp and slippery. Every time she made it a little higher, she fell back down. Her palms were scraped raw. Her knees were covered in mud and blood. Slowly, the sun went down. The bamboo forest turned completely black. a 6-year-old child sat trapped in the bottom of an earth pit, unable to see anything. Sometimes insects cried in the darkness. Sometimes leaves brushed against each other. Every sound made her jerk her head upward. Xu Wen was thirsty, hungry. Her throat had gone hoarse from shouting. Eventually, she had no strength left even to cry. She curled up at the bottom of the pit, hugging her knees, and she thought her parents might never find her. She didn't know how long had passed. Then, outside the hole, came the sound of feet stepping on dead leaves. Rustle. Xu Wen suddenly lifted her head. She thought her grandmother had finally come back to save her. She forced herself to stand. "Grandma, I'm here." The footsteps stopped at the edge of the hole. Then something dark lowered from above. It dropped all the way down in front of Xu Wen. She stepped back. By the moonlight, she finally saw what it was. A long braid. Black, shiny, and thick. The end of it hung just low enough for her to reach. Xu Wen was too frightened to grab it. Then, from above the hole, came a girl's voice. "Hurry! Hold on! I'll pull you up." Hearing that it was a girl speaking, Xu Wen finally found the courage. She wrapped both hands tightly around the braid. The next second, she felt herself being lifted. Little by little, her feet left the ground. The wall of the pit slid down past her. Xu Wen did not dare let go. Only when a hand reached down, grabbed her, and pulled her out of the hole did she finally collapse onto the ground. She lay there gasping for a long time before she could see who had saved her. It was a girl of 15 or 16. Her eyes were bright. Her cheeks were rosy. At the back of her head were several long braids. The braid that had dropped into the hole had been her own hair. Seeing that Xu Wen could barely stand, the girl turned and crouched down. Xu Wen understood. Carefully, she climbed onto the girl's back and wrapped her arms around her neck. The girl carried her out of the bamboo forest. Very soon, Xu Wen realized something was wrong. This older sister was walking far too fast. The bamboo and trees on both sides seemed to sweep backward in the darkness. The night wind cut coolly across Xu Wen's face. But lying on the girl's back, she felt no bumping at all. They crossed ridges and paths as if gliding over flat ground. Before long, Xu Wen could see the wall around her own yard. The girl put her down, then disappeared into the night. From outside the wall, Xu Wen could already hear her mother crying. She pushed open the gate and ran inside. "Mom!" Everyone in the room froze. Her mother rushed over and pulled her into her arms. Wang Gang's eyes turned red. Only the grandmother stood there staring at Xu Wen, her expression stiff with disbelief. That night, before bed, Xu Wen reached for the cloth doll as usual. When her fingers touched the back of the doll's head, she stopped. There had originally been 5 braids. Now, there were only 4. After that incident, Wang Gang and his wife separated completely from the old woman. Their family of 3 moved somewhere else. Xu Wen grew up slowly. For several years, nothing strange happened. Then one day, she went to the hillside to graze the family sheep as usual. The midday sun was warm, and the sheep were nearby, lowering their heads to eat grass. Xu Wen became sleepy and leaned against a tree to rest. She didn't know how long she had slept before a sharp pain woke her. The back of her right hand felt as if it had been stabbed twice with needles. She opened her eyes. There were 2 small holes on her hand, both bleeding. In the grass beside her, a venomous snake raised its head and flicked its tongue. Xu Wen's mind went blank. She forgot the sheep and ran toward home. But because she was running too fast, she tripped over a stone. She fell hard to the ground, and pain shot through her ankle. She gritted her teeth and tried to stand again, but the moment her right foot touched the ground, she fell to her knees. The hand bitten by the snake was growing numb. Waves of dizziness rushed into her head. Home was still far away. There was no one around. Xu Wen sat on the ground, and tears spilled down her face. For the first time, she truly felt it. She might not make it back. Then, through her blurred vision, she saw a pair of cloth shoes. Xu Wen lifted her head. Gray pants. A flower-patterned cotton jacket. Above that, the same face that had not changed in years. Bright eyes. Rosy cheeks. Xu Wen recognized her at once. The girl looked down at the hand that had been bitten by the snake. She said nothing. She picked up a few thin branches and quickly wove them into a ring, then slipped it over Xu Wen's wrist. Xu Wen stared at the ordinary branches, wondering how something like that could possibly help. The girl seemed to know what she was thinking. She casually pulled a few strands of grass from the ground. Her fingers moved quickly, twisting and folding. Soon, she had woven a little grasshopper. She placed it in Xu Wen's palm. The next second, the grasshopper really jumped. Then it jumped again. Xu Wen's eyes widened. For a moment, she forgot even the pain. The girl wove another ring of branches and placed it around Xu Wen's injured ankle. After a little while, the piercing pain began to fade. The girl helped her stand. Xu Wen tested her foot on the ground. It really didn't hurt anymore. She couldn't help asking, "Sister, who are you? Why do you always save me?" The girl still did not answer. She only walked Xu Wen all the way to the entrance of her home. Just before going inside, Xu Wen suddenly remembered the sheep on the mountain. "Sister, my family's sheep are still up there." The girl lifted her chin slightly. There was a calm certainty in her expression, as if telling her not to worry. Only then did Xu Wen go home. When her mother saw the ring of branches around her wrist, she asked what had happened. Xu Wen told her everything from beginning to end. When her mother heard that she had been bitten by a venomous snake, her face went white. She grabbed Xu Wen's hand to check, but the two bleeding puncture wounds had completely vanished. There was not even a mark. Even so, her mother was still afraid and immediately took her to see a doctor. Before leaving, she told Wang Gang to hurry up the mountain and find the sheep. But when mother and daughter came home, Wang Gang was already sitting inside drinking tea. His wife asked in surprise, "You found the sheep?" Wang Gang nodded. "I had only walked halfway up when I saw the whole flock coming home by itself, all in a line." He paused. "Far up on the slope, I thought I saw a teenage girl standing there." When Xu Wen heard that, she immediately ran into her room. The cloth doll had lost another braid. From that day on, the doll was no longer treated as a toy. Wang Gang's family placed it carefully in the house and honored it properly. Whenever Xu Wen had time, she would go and bow to it. In her heart, the only reason she had grown up safely was because the doll had always protected her. In the blink of an eye, Xu Wen turned 15. Back then, the village would sometimes organize outdoor movie nights. One evening, after the movie ended, it was already very late. Xu Wen walked home with several friends. When they passed a small hillside, Xu Wen suddenly stopped. Her friends had walked several steps before realizing she was no longer beside them. They turned around. Xu Wen was staring straight at a dark patch of grass by the roadside. "Xu Wen?" A friend called her name. She did not respond. The friend walked back and shook her arm. Xu Wen's eyes were dull. The next second, her whole body went soft and she collapsed to the ground. Her friends were terrified and ran back to the village to call for help. The villagers carried Xu Wen home. She woke up quickly, but it was as if she had suffered some terrible shock. She kept screaming. Whenever anyone came near her, she recoiled in fear. An elder in the village who understood these things came to look at her. He said Xu Wen had probably run into something unclean on the road. Following the elder's instructions, Wang Gong and his wife went to the place where Xu Wen had fainted and burned yellow paper offerings. But when they returned that day, Xu Wen still had not improved. That night, with no other choice, the couple knelt in front of the cloth doll and kowtowed again and again. "Please, save this child one more time." The next morning, Xu Wen finally calmed down, but her whole body was terribly weak. Wang Gong asked what she had seen the night before. Only then did Xu Wen speak about what she had experienced. She said that after the movie ended, while she was walking along the road, she suddenly heard someone call her name from behind. Thinking it was someone from the village, she turned around without thinking. But no one was there. When she reached the hillside, the voice appeared a second time. Xu Wen turned back again. This time, she saw a man's head slowly emerge from the grass. It was a man she had never seen before. He stepped out from the roadside and told her that another movie was still playing in the neighboring village. He said she should go with him to watch it. Xu Wen thought his appearance was too strange and refused immediately. The smile on the man's face faded. He walked up and grabbed her wrist. "Come." Xu Wen struggled, but the man's strength was terrifying. His 5 fingers clamped around her like iron, dragging her hard toward the hill. Xu Wen kicked and fought desperately. At last, she broke free and turned to run home. She did not dare look back the entire way. What was strange was that she would usually meet at least a few villagers on that road. But that night, there was not a single person. The surroundings were so quiet, it felt as if the entire village had suddenly emptied. Xu Wen ran into her house. Inside, it was dark. Her parents were gone. She was so frightened that she crawled under her blanket and wrapped herself tightly inside. Before long, footsteps sounded outside the courtyard gate. Someone came in. The footsteps slowly entered the room, then stopped beside the bed. The person did not lift the blanket. He only walked around the bed, circle after circle. The sound of his shoes scraping the floor moved back and forth beside Xu Wen's ears. She hid under the blanket, biting her own hand, not daring to make even the smallest sound. Just as she was about to break down completely, a warm hand gently patted her. Xu Wen trembled, then carefully lifted the edge of the blanket. The familiar flower-patterned cotton jacket was right in front of her. The older sister was sitting beside her. In her hand, she held something black. The moment the man outside came closer, she rushed out. Xu Wen heard a violent fight. The black object in the girl's hand struck the man again and again. The man kept retreating. Finally, he fled. Xu Wen's nerves, strained all night, loosened at once. She fell into a confused sleep. When she opened her eyes again, her parents were guarding the bed. Later, the villagers investigated and learned who the man was. He was someone from the neighboring village who had died not long before. His grave was near that hillside. People said he had never married while alive. The elders believed he must have seen Xu Wen on the road and wanted to take her away to become his bride in death. After Xu Wen recovered, the first thing she did was burn incense for the cloth doll. The doll had lost another braid. Only 2 were left. When Xu Wen was 20, an old man in the village died. He had no children and no relatives. The villagers helped bury him on a hillside outside the village. Not long after that, livestock began disappearing. At first, only chickens and ducks went missing. Then even sheep and cattle began to vanish. After that came a drought unlike anything the village had ever seen. It was already the season when rain should have fallen, but not a single drop came from the sky. The soil in the fields cracked open in hard pieces. The crops slowly yellowed and withered. The village elders all felt something was wrong, so they invited a ritual master to examine the area. The master walked around the village for a long time. Finally, he stopped in front of the grave of the old man who had recently died. "Dig it up," he said. When the coffin was opened, everyone around it took a step back. Inside the coffin were piles of animal bones and feathers from chickens and ducks. A thick, rotten stench rushed out. The old man's body should have already begun to decay, but it had barely rotted at all. Instead, it was covered in a layer of red growth. It looked like hair, or like dense red fungus wrapping the entire corpse. His hair and nails had grown unusually long, as if they had kept growing underground. The ritual master's face turned grim. He said the corpse had become a hanba. In Chinese folklore, a hanba is a drought demon, a dead body that transforms into something that can suck moisture from the land and bring ruin to the living. It had to be burned immediately. The villagers gathered a huge amount of firewood and built it around the corpse. Then they set it alight. The fire burned until nightfall. Log after log turned to ash, but the corpse in the center of the flames still barely changed. The ritual master stood beside the fire, chanting continuously. It did nothing. By the time the sky was completely dark, no one dared let the fire go out. They could only keep adding more wood. That night, Xu Wen lay in bed, unable to stop thinking about the corpse she had seen that day. Without realizing it, she fell asleep. In her dream, she was walking alone along a village path. Everything around her was gray, as if the world had been covered in a thick layer of fog. Far away on the hillside, there was a glow of fire. Xu Wen followed the light upward. When she climbed to the slope, she saw 2 figures fighting beside the burning pyre. One was completely on fire. Its body had burned black. Its limbs were thin and long. Its face could not be seen clearly. The other wore a flower-patterned cotton jacket and gray pants. Xu Wen recognized her immediately. It was the older sister. The 2 were fighting savagely. At first, the girl had the upper hand, but little by little, her movements slowed. The monster suddenly grabbed her by the collar and slammed her hard to the ground. Xu Wen's heart clenched. She wanted to rush over and help, but no matter how hard she ran, she could not get close to the fire. It was as if an invisible wall stood between them. the girl struggled up from the ground. There was a long cut across her forehead. Then she stood, raised both hands, and grabbed the last 2 braids at the back of her head. With one fierce pull, she tore them off. The moment the 2 braids fell into her hands, they turned into 2 swords. Xu Wen looked at the girl's now short hair. The girl held the swords and turned back to look at her once. Then she faced the monster and charged. At that moment, a violent wind rose over the hillside. It blew so hard, Xu Wen could not open her eyes. All she heard was a deafening crash. She sat up in bed. Her whole body was covered in cold sweat. A terrible feeling rushed into her heart. She didn't even put on her shoes properly before running to the main room where the cloth doll was kept. The moment she saw it, Xu Wen began to cry. The flower-patterned cotton jacket on the doll was torn and ragged. There were slashes everywhere. The last 2 braids on the back of its head were gone. Only short hair remained. Xu Wen held the doll and sat on the floor, crying until she could barely breathe. In her heart, she already knew. The sister who had protected her all these years might not come back this time. The next day, news spread through the village. The corpse that could not be burned had suddenly made a thunderous sound in the fire sometime after midnight. Soon after that, it quickly turned to ash. The drought gradually passed. From then on, Xu Wen never again saw the girl in the flower-patterned cotton jacket, but the braidless cloth doll remained enshrined in the house. Years later, Xu Wen left the village to work outside. She fell in love. She prepared to marry. When they discussed the wedding, Xu Wen insisted on holding one ceremony back in her hometown. She wanted the cloth doll that had grown up with her to witness the most important day of her life. On the day of the wedding, a strange man came to the village. He looked to be in his 20s. He was dressed plainly, but the moment Wang Gang saw his face, he froze. Although the man looked much younger now, Wang Gang could never mistake that face. It was the same Taoist he had rescued from the river decades earlier. Back then, the man had looked over 40 and spoken with the voice of a child. Now, he looked only 20-something. But when he opened his mouth, his voice sounded like that of a man in his 50s. He first congratulated Xu Wen on her marriage. Then he walked alone into the main room and took down the cloth doll that had been honored there for so many years. He said that he had come not only to attend the wedding, but also to take the doll back. When Xu Wen heard this, she panicked. "Can't you leave her here?" she asked. "I've always thought of her as family." The Taoist looked at her and said softly, "The bond between you ended long ago. There is no meaning in keeping her here." Xu Wen's eyes slowly turned red. The Taoist paused. "Besides, her soul has already gone." The moment he said that, Xu Wen's tears fell. She finally understood. That dream had not only been a dream. The sister who had grown up beside her had truly vanished while protecting her for the last time. Seeing her cry like that on her wedding day, the Taoist seemed unable to bear it. He placed the cloth doll on the table, then slowly untied the clothes around its body. There was no cotton inside, only grains and a dried piece of ginger. The surface of that ginger was covered in wounds, large and small, as if every danger Xu Wen had faced over the years had left a mark on it. The Taoist placed the ginger in Xu Wen's hands. "Find a good place," he said. "Plant it." Xu Wen held the dried ginger and looked at it. No matter how she looked, it did not seem like something that could still live. She couldn't help asking, "Can it really sprout?" The Taoist looked at her. "In this world," he said, "there is no such thing as impossible." Then he took the empty cloth doll and left. Xu Wen did not dare plant the ginger carelessly. She wrapped it in red cloth and kept it carefully for many years. Many years later, Wang Gang and his wife passed away one after the other. After burying her parents, Xu Wen finally brought that dried piece of ginger back to her hometown. In front of her parents' graves, she dug a small hole. With her own hands, she buried it in the soil. After that, every year when she came to sweep the graves, she would always stop a little longer at that spot. She would look at the earth, look for any bit of green pushing through. Nothing grew the first year. Nothing grew the second year. Still, Xu Wen kept returning because she always believed what the Taoist had told her, and she believed that the sister who had carried her home again and again, the sister who had stood between her and death, had not truly disappeared. One day, perhaps, from the soil in front of her parents' graves, a small new sprout would rise.